Hi, everybody.
Why,
Hello.
hello.
Welcome to DnDTime Talks, where we discuss all things Dungeons and Dragons. I am Pete.
I am. I was wanted to say Pete, but I'm Jeremy.
I mean, I guess everyone would want to be Pete if they could. That's not true. Jeremy, how you doing,
man?
man?
At least one person who wouldn't want to be Pete. It's me.
And oh, I thought you were gonna say it was me, which would have been sad.
You know what? I'm doing pretty okay. You know what? I'm not doing pretty okay. I'm doing super good. My feet hurt a lot less than they have been, which is excellent. Keep your elbows off the table. Excellent point, Ivalon. Etiquette. Pinky out.
If you ever describe your character putting their elbows on the table, you should never be allowed to put. You should never be allowed to play Dungeons and Dragons again.
Yep, Mr. Plunderloot taking the week off. Good call. This isn't one you want to hear, man.
So yeah, today's topic is etiquette. Over the course of the next hour or so, we're going to be breaking down a lot of different kind of aspects of etiquette that covers a lot of different things. I think before we kind of get into it, I want to preface this conversation by saying we're going to be talking about a lot of, I think, more serious and more sensitive issues than we usually talk about here on DnDTime Talks. So I'd just like to kind of say to everyone in chat, keep an open mind, to be respectful of everyone else. And definitely talk to us in chat if we say anything that you disagree with. And, me and Jeremy's perspectives on a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about is tempered by who we are and our own experiences. So people who might have different experiences than us, please speak up and tell us your opinions on what we're going about.
Yeah, and this is a very heavily opinion-based thing. And we're going to be talking a lot about
sure.
social norms, what is or is not acceptable socially, and the environments that Pete and I are, have experience with and live in may be different from yours. So keep in mind that the people you play with and the environment you live in may affect this, might change your opinions on some of these things. But for the most part, what we're going to talk about is going to be universally applicable, very I wouldn't say basic, but helpful things. And yes, Macabre Derek, you're screwed on this one, buddy. No, actually,
that's a great first piece of etiquette. I've yes, you actually have very good, Derek. Yeah, wear clothes to the game. For sure wear clothes. That was the first thing we were going to cover, but thank you, Ive. We don't have to hit that one. So yeah, some of the things that we are going to cover as we're beginning to dive in now. We're going to be talking about solving interplayer issues. We're going to be talking about inclusivity at the table. We're going to be talking about metagaming. We're going to talk about just kind of how to be a decent person when playing Dungeons and Dragons. Because
why would I want to be a decent person?
Well, exactly. Well,
are you telling me that if I'm a decent person, people will want to play with me more and I'll have more friends to play with? I apologize. Sorry. Go ahead. Go on.
No, it's good. I am telling you that because I guess as we're getting in now to why we're kind of bringing this up and talking about this, because D&D, unlike any other game, it brings people into the experience. You feel an attachment to your character that I don't think comes in any video game and any other kind of, any other kind of social situation other than just like talking and interacting with people and just being a human. D&D is probably the closest thing to that. So I found that one of the best side effects of D&D is that it forges friendships. I've made so many close friends through playing D&D. I became close friends, I think, with me and you, Jeremy, would probably not be as tight as we were if it was not for D&D.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd talk to you at all if we didn't play D&D.
Actually, that could actually be true. But I think by the same line, D&D is something that can be really emotional, something that people take really seriously, and it's just as easy for people to clash and to get into disagreements and to not get along because of differences in opinions and ideologies that can really come out and come forth in any kind of game like this.
Yeah, exactly. And not only is this important for like new players or players with new groups or playing online with random people, this is important for everyone, even like long established groups of friends. Like people, you can miss the simple things sometimes. And I feel like talking about this is beneficial for everyone, not just the newer players, not just the newer groups, but even established long-term players, especially for established long-term players who have sets of predetermined like things that they think is okay, you know, and that's fine with their groups, but especially with jumping into newer groups or playing with different people, it's important to realize what works with one group doesn't work with every.
Absolutely. So do you want to start diving in proper?
You know, I think we should jump right in. Yeah.
All right.
And before we go, Farku, we're friends. Less than 3.
We are friends, Farku. I see that. Farku, we're friends. Yes, let's dive right into it. That's it. That's all I have to say on the subject.
That's
yes.
all I gotta say.
The answer is yes. So for everything that we're going to be talking about today, and every problem that we try and talk about that may come up, and any solutions that we provide for it, almost invariably, what we're going to be telling you is that the end result is the thing that you should do is talk. The thing that you should do is talk to your players, talk to your GM, talk it out amongst your play group. That is, if there's anything that you take away from this discussion and there's anything that you pull a value from it, please let it be that. Communicate with the people that you play D&D with.
Yeah, and I mean, really, this goes even beyond D&D. Communicate with people that you have relationships with. Like, D&D is a collaborative experience. You play together and you forge relationships with the people you play with. So, you know, it's just as important. Talk to people that you care about. If you have a problem, talk about it. It's not going to get better by not doing that. But yeah, I think that we're going to keep coming back to that one. So let's jump in for our first kind of topic here. We're going to cover a couple different things. We're going to talk about some faux pas that can happen at the table. We're going to talk about inclusivity and making an inclusive kind of environment. And we're going to talk at the end, maybe it will touch on stuff like metagaming and
it just depends on
behavioral kind of.
Yeah, depends on sort of how much time we have. But the first thing that we wanted to talk about, because we wanted to make sure that we had enough time to devote to this topic, is inclusivity. And when we say inclusivity, what we mean by that is when you're playing D&D or any just kind of collaborative storytelling game, and that's a thing, again, this advice applies to any game, regardless, doesn't have to be Dungeons and Dragons, any tabletop RPG. But when we say inclusivity, what we mean is creating a role-playing space for yourself and for the players at your table that feels welcoming, regardless of race, of gender, age, sexuality, ability, of any other kind of backgrounds, religious, economic, social background, any other number of different things that make up who someone is, and creating a role-playing space that feels welcoming for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when you're playing online, a lot of the times you don't have, when you're playing in person and you know the people you're playing with, like closely on a personal level, you already know a lot of this information. You'll understand like, oh, so-and-so has strong opinions on like politics. So let's not have these big questions like the death penalty and stuff show up in my campaign. You don't know any of that stuff when you're playing people online. A lot of the times you don't know pretty much anything about who you're playing with. Race, gender, political opinions, anything. And so it's really important to be careful and realize and think about other people's opinions and feelings on that. Oh, hello, buddy. Like, for example, some people might not like my cat, but I love my cat. Stay to say hello.
Yeah, and I think on the surface, a lot of that sounds really simple, and it can be summed up. It can be summed up with a really popular phrase in the Twitch community, which is "Don't be a dick." It's kind of a community. It's kind of a community guideline that a lot of channels just kind of espouse as their slogan, and I think that pretty much all of the members of this DnDTime community has been really cool, and I think pretty much everyone subscribes to that belief of not being a dick. And we're going to kind of speak, for the most part, on the assumption that people aren't going to be falling into the really obvious faux pas. For example, don't use hate speech in your games, like that kind of very simple thing. We assume that everyone here already knows that. But I think Yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
Oh, I was just going to say, don't be a dick is a real simple thing to say. And I don't think, there are people who do go out there with the intent of being a dick. But a lot of the times, what'll happen is people will do stuff that they think is perfectly fine. And maybe in the past it has been, but to other people, that is, you're being a dick. And that's kind of what we're going to start to talk about a little bit. So, I was just going to say that doesn't make the individual wrong per se, but it's just a lot of these things can be solved by communicating well between each other, like before games start and just consistently throughout when things when things start to get dicey. So yeah, there's a lot more. There's more nuance.
Did you want to? Yeah. Okay. Did you want to?
What?
Oh, nothing. I just saw you.
Oh no!
Okay.
I'm
Anyway,
sorry. That my mouse just kind of goes wild.
You always confuse me when you highlight things on the. You always confuse me when you highlight things on it. Anyway, there's a lot more like nuances and pitfalls that are pretty ingrained into the culture of D&D that are kind of easy to forget, that might not be as cut and dry from one person to the next. So to start in on. To start in on something that I think is going to be a really extreme example, just to kind of
the most extreme example.
Yeah, hopefully the most extreme example, including rape in your game,
or other sexual,
any kind of sexual violence or assault. It's not okay, and if you've been in the D&D community as long as kind of we have, and I think a lot of you have, no doubt you've heard the horror stories about these kind of games where a player character is put into a situation where they are sexually assaulted, or they are sexually assaulting another character, which is awful, and it's a completely unacceptable situation for any player or person to have to be put into. And that's something that is never okay without explicit consent from everyone at the table, not just the people involved, but everyone at the table. And you have to be extremely close and comfortable with that group and know for a fact that everyone is okay. Because it's also very easy for people at a table who are a little bit shyer about things to be afraid to kind of speak up. Yeah, that's the worst, and that's the thing that you want to kind of avoid.
As a player, if you're interested in pursuing some of these much more risque role-playing or other kind of activities in Dungeons and Dragons, you can't just assume like, oh, they're my pals, they'll be okay with it. You can't do that. You need to have a conversation. You need to talk and make sure that everyone is okay with that kind of a situation. And that's awkward, maybe, for a lot of people, but it's really important. And as a dungeon master, you need to pay attention that if these kind of things show up, you need to act on it, especially if that conversation has not been had.
And Ivalon pointed out he means consent with players and not characters. Absolutely. If I wasn't clear about that, that's my bad. Yeah. But that is, of course, an extreme case, and I think I hope that most players already understand that. But what about when you dial that back a bit and just including sexual content of any kind in your game? Every player at your table is going to have different comfort levels and different kind of degrees of what they find acceptable in that kind of situation. And if you don't talk about that with your players, you can just make someone feel isolated. And the more sort of mild it is, the less someone who's shy is going to want to speak out. So it's really important that you don't take for granted that because you think something is fine, that everyone else at the table necessarily thinks that it's fine.
Yeah, and likewise between different tables. Different groups of players will have very different opinions on what is okay and what's not okay, and making sure that everyone's on the same page every time is very important.
Macabre Derek mentions here, speaking as someone who runs those kind of games, you usually make 2 or 3 talks beforehand. You don't hide the fact that your games fall in the R or NC-17, and the taboos that players have are better brought to the table now. You've heard a lot of people say that they're okay with anything, and you're very wary of those players. Yeah, that is a really good policy, and that's just a really mature and safe way to engage in that. Because if that's the way that you want to, play, and everyone's on board, then you can, I'm sure, have a really rewarding role-playing experience in that. It's just important that you make sure that is the case. So yeah, that's great. So moving on from that, yeah, if you we can't get links through Ive because they just get deleted by the bot, but Jeremy can go through and set those up. So let's move along kind of the same line a little bit, and again, I know that what we're talking about isn't kind of our usual tone, and if we're again saying things that make anyone comfortable here, yeah, I mean, we intend to lighten things up as we move through, but we wanted to talk about this first. So along the same line, I want to talk a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about racism in D&D games, because I think, again, baseline, people know not to be racist, not to say racially charged things, but there are a lot of ideas that I think are present in, I would even say, the majority of people's D&D games that can have a lot of really racially charged sort of ideas behind them. One of these things is fantasy racism. I think everyone has done this at some point. Things like, oh yeah, the dwarves hate elves. And then people tend to take it farther. They'll say things like, yes, the dwarves have a racial slur for elves. They call dwarves knife ears, which I think a lot of people think that's just kind of harmless fun. And maybe for your group it is. But this is kind of an abstraction of a lot of really kind of hot topic, kind of real racial conflict, and can be like a really unpleasant reminder of the real world for people that aren't comfortable with that. D&D is meant to be this kind of escape from reality, or, again, any role-playing game, and you want to be able to be anything that you want to be. You want to be able to just go in and, yes, I'm an orc with a big axe and I cast magic spells also. And that's fun, and it allows you to escape that. And being brought back into that kind of environment when you don't want to be reminded of kind of the issues of real life can be bad for people. So, it's not, I'm saying it's an inherent thing that you shouldn't include in your games and worlds. It's just something that, again, you need to talk about.
Yeah, and this is especially important because when now that we've exited, I think everyone realizes that sex and sexual violence is a dicey topic. Everyone kind of gets that. When you get to here, for example, Dungeons and Dragons has orcs hate elves built in. Like, that is a core facet of the game. And it's something that a lot of players and a lot of dungeon masters are going to just assume is okay because it's always been there and it's always existed and it is like it's traditional. That doesn't mean you shouldn't talk about it. That doesn't mean you shouldn't explain that, because that's just one of the things that's going to make people really uncomfortable, especially if they don't expect that. You know, if someone who's not as intimately familiar with old school Dungeons and Dragons and the history of the game and the lore of the Forgotten Realms and all that crap comes in and they're like, oh, an elf. That means they're tall and have pointy ears like Legolas. I want to be that. And everyone's going to be friends. And they come in and they play, and the first orc is like, oh, I'm going to murder you. And it's like, oh, I just wanted to be friends. You're here in a tavern. Like, they're going to be confused and they're not going to be happy because they just don't get it. They don't understand why you're acting the way you are. Just because you have that deeper context, they might not.
Yeah, along the same vein, Infinite Tacos mentioned in chat the Drow. The Drow are a really complicated thing in the world of in the world of D&D from a social standpoint, because for those who aren't familiar with the Drow race, and I think most of the people in D&D time are, because there's some really prominent Drow players that play Drow in the kind of traditional way. The Drow are a race of evil underdark dwelling elves, and there's a lot of talk and there's a lot of people who are of the opinion, as Xanderil just pointed out, that racism and sexism is a huge thing with them, because they're a matriarchal society where the women are all just these terrible spider monsters.
They're and super evil.
Yep, and they are all slavers. Or they kind of enslave the male population is in the kind of the lore of it, and they're also dark-skinned, which is just
the black powerful women are evil slavers, guys. Dungeons and Dragons at its finest.
Yeah, it's decidedly problematic, and it's why that we. So in D&D time, we actually, like I said, we have some players that play the Drow, which I don't think it's inherently wrong to play a Drow in that manner. What's important, I think, is that when you're working with a race that is just kind of implied as inherently evil, I just don't think that you should have a race that is inherently evil at your table, unless it's something that you are comfortable with. So maybe there are Drow that are like that, but maybe there are also Drow that are not like that, and that are regular people that are good people. So
what's really important is that you're communicating, that people understand that that's going to be the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, for sure. It's such a dense and complicated issue.
If all the orcs in your world are gonna murder people and eat them after, that's something that's okay. You can make that choice. Oh yeah, right. And we don't even want to talk about Drizzt, the male Drow, who's the good guy. But we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah, in his own. Yeah, good idea. Probably.
Yeah, what's important is that even if something is an established and long historied thing in Dungeons and Dragons or in any RPG, that doesn't necessarily mean it's okay, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you can assume that everyone at the table is going to be cool with it. RPGs, specifically tabletop RPGs, have a really long history of sexist kind of environments, and it's been breaking out of that in recent years, which is excellent. The whole community's been moving in a very, very good direction, and yeah, it's just important to keep that in mind and not go too crazy with it. Just know what you.
Transkitten says, "I'd love to do a talk about racism and sexism within fantasy." That's something.
I'm sorry.
This is probably as much as we'll. This is probably as much as we will go. But what if your table is full of weird people and they're uncomfortable with PC stuff? Farku says. I mean, that sounds like a table that would be comfortable playing together. It's just important that if you are not, that you express that to people. And if everyone else at the table thinks like, if you're like mocked at the table for bringing up issues like this, then you should probably leave that group. That's just not the right group for you, and you should find a group of people that will play and respect your wishes and be in the game that you want to be in, that you can be comfortable playing in.
Yeah, and we had a couple other things to mention here, being characters that are blind or deaf or struggle with some sort of mental or physical illness. And it's important that we talk about those. But before we jump on that, just because the conversation's kind of naturally gone there, everything that we've talked about so far is, yes, you need to talk to people about it, but it's not inherently wrong. You can have rape in your games. You can have slavery in your games. You can have all of these things in your game, but you need to communicate with the people. And like Farku was saying in chat, if the people that you're playing with want to do that kind of stuff, there's nothing wrong with that. Your fun is your fun. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just make sure, no matter what, you need to have the conversations and you need to talk about it as a group. You can't make an assumption that everyone's going to be okay with whatever's going on without talking to everyone, especially if you're going into that dicier territory. So sorry for that kind of derail, but kind of
no,
was relevant.
No, I think that's important. Yeah. So I think we've been talking a lot about things.
Whoa, hold up. Mr. Plunderloot, excellent point. Always bring snacks if it's a real life game. Always bring snacks.
Also,
that is number one etiquette.
Also, if you're playing in real life, maybe let the DM not bring snacks. Like, everyone but the DM should bring snacks, is my opinion.
As a dungeon master, I agree.
Yeah.
No, bring weird snacks. All right, we've upped it. It's even better. Anyway, back on topic. Sorry about that. I had to.
Yeah. So we've been talking a lot about things to like avoid and to watch out for, but I think and the important question to ask from that is, how do I create like an inclusive role-playing space? So obviously, first and foremost, as we've been saying, talk about it. If you're DMing a game, think about what you're planning on doing. Think about what kind of pitfalls you may be walking into, and let your players know what those are. Be upfront about it, and hear their feedback and what they have to say on the subjects. Explicitly ask people, as Derek had mentioned before that he does, Macabre Derek. He had said he asks people what their kind of taboos are. Yes, ask what their limits are, ask what their expectations are from the game, addressing maybe some major general concerns, like if they're comfortable with any kind of sexual activity in the game. Keep in mind your player backstory as a player. Think about what cultural ramifications that might have. Like the freed slave is a really common player backstory that has a lot of cultural ramifications that you should consider in the context of your group.
Actually, there's another really interesting comment in the chat right now from the Nerds table. My DM is always drunk. There's another important thing to talk about: drugs and alcohol at the table. Different groups are going to have totally different opinions. Some groups, stop it! You're climbing on my thing. Certain groups will sit around and get drunk and play D&D all night, and they're going to have a great time because that's just what they love to do. Other groups aren't going to do that, and you need to make sure that is there, that communication's there, because if you invite someone new into your group, and that's what you do, you guys sit around and get high and drink and play D&D, and that person was not expecting that, was not ready for that.
Yeah.
That's really bad etiquette. That's really rude. And yes, Farfel, that is my cat Data, who made a cameo. And it's important also to. Sorry, go ahead. I was ranting.
Oh no, finish your. Okay. Well, another thing I wanted to point out is to be respectful of sensitive issues. If you want to make a world that feels inclusive, one of the obvious ways to do that is to create a world with diverse people and just a large array of inspired by different cultures and different aspects of life. And when you do that, you should treat characters that are kind of different than your own viewpoint with respect. I think a good example is if you're going to play a character that is deaf, don't play that kind of like you're joking about being deaf. Don't make your character based on just saying the word "what" very loudly and very often. Do some research on the thing and learn about what it means, what it means to kind of have that disability, and like I said, treat it with respect.
And I mean, a much more common than I think deafness. I'm sure people have done that before, but mental ailments, mental retardation, mental incapacities or deficits, very, very common. Oh, I rolled a 3 for my intelligence. Well, don't make your character a mockery of someone with a serious mental disability. That's not okay. You can make your character dumb. That's fine. But there are I think it's obvious. And I think some people sometimes forget that. That's not just how you should be treating that kind of situation. Or if you are playing a character with a serious mental disability, that you give some credit to that you don't you don't make a mockery.
Again, just treat those kind of things with the respect that they deserve. Take them, seriously if you're going to do it. But and if you're kind of, make sure you include kind of elements in your story. If you're going to include elements that are a little bit more fringe, for example, you have kind of like we were talking about before, these kind of inherently evil races. Make sure that there are places in your game, if you're going to include that, where people do feel welcome and that there is kind of a sense of camaraderie. Like have, a contrast that probably isn't fun for players if that is the whole world. It's an okay kind of thing to say, yes, this exists in the world, and that can make a world add a layer of realism. It can add a layer of conflict to the game, but it shouldn't necessarily be the whole game. So just, make sure there's spaces in your game where, there's environments where all characters feel welcome.
I completely agree. And part of doing that, right, is going to make the world a more interesting place. It's going to make it interesting. Having that racism in the game, having dwarves that hate elves and elves that hate orcs, and can help to make the world feel more real. It's just make sure that everyone's on the same page with it. That's really all we're talking about. Getting back to the topic at hand, talk to your other players and DMs and everything. Communicate.
Yeah. I think that's all we have on the topic of inclusivity. Do you have anything else you want to say on this subject before we kind of move on?
I think I'm good for now. I had something that I wanted to say, but it has escaped my mind.
Well, if it comes back to you,
it wasn't important, or it was very. So we'll find.
Anyway, thank you, everyone. We're moving away from this more kind of minefield of discussion, and we appreciate everyone being respectful in the chat and contributing. And so let's talk a little bit about solving player conflicts.
We actually had one thing in the chat a long while ago. One comment in the chat, but I believe it was Reflected 10.8. May have been Infinite Tacos. Violence. It is single combat decides all conflict.
The Thunderdome. 2 enter, 1 leaves. That's the best way to solve conflict. But if you don't have access to the Thunderdome, a great way to do it is to talk about it. So I think someone anyway, sorry, I got distracted by something. Sorry about that, everyone.
I got attacked by my cat. It's all
there's all kinds of stuff.
As a dungeon master, when there is interplayer conflict, it's kind of up to you to take the lead. This is one of the things a lot of people think the DM's job is to run the game, is to make the world work, and that's not the DM's job. The DM's job is to make sure that everyone at the table is having fun. And when conflict starts to happen, part of your job is diffusing that and making sure that everyone goes back to having fun. And so a lot of the times as Dungeon Master, you serve as a mediator, where you kind of talk between the players and you get people to voice their concerns in ways where they're not being attacked, so that they can feel like they can voice their concerns. And it's your job to, if things get too crazy, to take the break and say, hey, everyone, things are getting too heated, let's chill. And there are times, like, for example, sexual violence that was not, that people haven't talked about. That's the point. As the Dungeon Master, you got to pull the kill switch. No, game stops now. Everything stops. We got to talk about this because that wasn't cool. Another much more common occurrence is a player casting a spell on another player. Oh, I cast Dominate Person on your character because you're doing something I don't want you to do. Or I cast Command on your character because you're doing something I don't want you to do. And these are very, very common conflicts that are super easy to solve, but oftentimes end up just with yelling back and forth and disruption and blah.
Farku mentioned in chat that we could mention the different types of players. I think
that's a whole new episode.
I was gonna say, I think that's worthy of an entire episode, actually, going through and how to DM for different groups.
There are very different types of players. Very, very different.
So one thing that you'll sometimes have to do in resolving player conflicts, one of the things that you may have to do is kick out a problem player or leave the group. Most people like kind of avoiding confrontation, which is certainly understandable, but it's better to cut out serious issues and root out problems rather than let them just kind of sit around while everyone's kind of fun slowly just gets sapped away by, inter-player conflict at the table. So that's something to think about for sure. What was the point that I wanted? There was an important point that I wanted to make. Oh yes, I wanted to mention on Reddit, there's a great chart that you'll see posted on almost every question that a player asks about kind of how to resolve a conflict. And basically it's a flow chart that says, talk about it with the person. Is it resolved? Great. If not, can you kick the person out of the group? No. If not, or if yes, great. If no, leave the group. That was like basically the flow chart. And I think that that's a very good thing. You should also talk to the other people at the table, aside from the person that you're having issues with. If you're shy or timid, to make sure that to kind of have someone to back you up if you're a little bit nervous and don't like conflict. Because I think that's a kind of a common thing in the D&D community. I think the D&D community is a very non-confrontational community.
And it's really important to realize sometimes you take a step back. Like, leaving a group doesn't have to be I hate these people for everything.
Yes.
If you come to the table, you guys get together, say you and your group of longtime friends get together for a session 0. Maybe you have 4 different people that you all know each other. You've all played D&D maybe as different groups, so you played with each other a little bit, but never as the same group. And you get together and the DM's like, all right, I want to play this very sexual city-based intrigue campaign where you got to fuck your way to the top. And, everyone at the table is like, oh my God, I'm so into that. Can we get lost in Barovia and play the Court of Strahd where we court Strahd? And he's like, oh yeah, you can. Well, you know what? You're sitting there like, I do not want to do this. And everyone's super excited, so you're like, I don't want to bring this up. And in that situation, there's nothing wrong with being the one who sits back, says, you know what, guys, I'm going to sit out for this campaign. I'll play with the next one. It's all cool. And they'll be like, if they're, really good friends, they'll be like, no, it's okay. We don't have to do that. But you'll see like they were super into this thing that you think's real weird, and that's fine. You know, sometimes you choose to take a knee so that your friends can do whatever weird thing they want to do. And other times you'll come
so
to
good.
a group of people, and this is the opposite scenario where they're all like, yeah, we want to be marauders and we rape and pillage because we're Vikings and we take the slaves back on our ships and it'll be sick. And you're like, I don't want to do that. And they're like, but that's the game we're playing, so you have to do it. That's when you say, oh.
No, you have to not play in that game. That's what you have to do.
And that's, oh, Nerds Table. If you missed that, I'm sorry. You got to watch the VOD. It was a good one. I had a Jeremy explosion moment.
That was a very good one.
Speaking of which, I'm going to put that quart of straw in my back pocket.
Also, I think Alex got kicked for some reason. I think he just wrote what you said and maybe got banned for it. So I was going to lead into talking a little bit about metagaming. If you want to let him back in, I don't know if that's easy.
Is Alex kicked? Oh, geez.
Yeah, he got kicked for sure.
Be able to do that, so I don't know what's happening. Anyway, I'll figure out what's going on with that. You keep going, please.
Yeah. We'll have to figure that out. So let's talk a little bit about metagaming. For anyone who's not familiar with what metagaming is, basically metagaming is when a player lets their out-of-character knowledge, what they know as a human, affect what they do in the game, which is generally considered bad etiquette by the community at large. I think that on the whole, people have a little bit more of a guttural reaction to metagaming. They have a tendency to label things metagaming that aren't necessarily that, and they're a little bit harsh on the idea as a whole. But I think there's a lot of metagaming that's actually totally acceptable and okay and makes the game more fun. So for starters, here's a good example of metagaming in a way that makes the game more fun. In one of the games that I used to play with Jeremy, there was a campaign where it was my birthday, and I talked to everyone. I was like, hey, let's all go hunt down some Yetis, because I didn't want to do anything that would interact with the main storyline, because I was planning on doing a lot of heavy drinking, and we were just going to kind of jump around and, just do some generally goofy stuff that our characters would never have done. Our characters would literally have never gone on a Yeti hunt. They were very serious people, and they didn't actually need to collect Yeti furs, as they were kind of claiming. But we figured out a way in character to justify that, and we had an absolute blast. That was a really memorable session, and all of the players at the table had fun. So even though we were doing things that were inherently out of character. Oh yes, Card Pocket was in that game. We were doing things that were inherently out of character, and we were doing them because of our player knowledge and what we wanted as players. That was okay, and it led to a really fun and sort of memorable session.
Game. Almost killed everyone.
Yeah, I mean, there was almost a TPK, and it was absolutely brutal, but it was fun, and it was because we metagamed and just did what we wanted to do rather than what our characters would necessarily do, which isn't always wrong. Jeremy, you want to talk about Bucket?
Yeah, another thing about role-playing metagaming. So I recently finished up a campaign that I was playing in a campaign run by Pete. Oh, wrong way. I'm putting the wrong way. Run by Pete, where I was playing a character named Bucket. Bucket was not an intelligent character. Bucket was an ogre. And the problem with Bucket was Bucket is dumb. But I am not dumb. And so I had to come up with a way I had things that I wanted to do that I wanted Bucket to be able to do, because I wanted to play the game. And the way we handled that, or the way I handled that, is Bucket is a very wise character. He had a high wisdom because he was a druid. And so I would think of whatever I was thinking of, right? The logical conclusion or solution to the puzzle or whatever it is. And I would try and think of, well, how does Bucket come up with this, right? How does Bucket come to the same conclusion? And maybe it is Bucket thinks about like the moon and the cycle of the moon, and because the moon changes and gets smaller and then larger, we just have to wait for the tide to go out and then come back in, and then the water's high enough for us to swim across this chasm, right? Or whatever. I don't think that actually happened. I can't come up with a thing off the top of my head. But the if it was like a puzzle, coming up to the solution, you know, I could just put it in Bucket's own, in Bucket's kind of perspective, in this very wise but dumb perspective. We had the same situation with like sphinxes, where the sphinx would ask a riddle, and like I got the riddle, but Bucket, there's no way Bucket's gonna fucking puzzle that again. Pardon my language. I keep saying the fuck word, and there's no way Bucket's gonna figure out the trick of the riddle, but he might be able to liken it to something else. And so, even though this is metagame,
well, maybe he just
Jeremy
guesses,
figuring out, yeah, or maybe he just guesses, right? But it's metagame. Jeremy figured this out. The character wouldn't. And then how? Well, then taking it the next step, how would the character can still make it okay?
So, same vein. Fox and Bucks. I met a game with monsters. Alas, I'm a researcher checking out the stat blocks on all those spooky foes that you're going to be facing off against. I don't even think that that's necessarily. I think that's the one that is probably the most common metagaming. Personally, I don't even find that annoying. I think there's a lot of situations where it's reasonable for characters to know how to beat a monster. Like if you encounter a troll and you see it regenerating, maybe you know for a fact, because you've read the monster stat block, that dealing fire will prevent regeneration. But it's also just a logical conclusion for someone to make up. Like, oh yes, his wounds are healing. I'll cauterize them with flames so they won't heal. Like it's not that huge of a logical leap to expect your characters to make. And as long as you kind of justify it in character and role play with it, personally, I'm fine with it if players work around stuff like that at my table, at least. And I don't think that's necessarily true for everyone. Actually, I know it's not true for everyone. We had Nerd's Table in SAP says, I hate players who stat check my monsters. Yeah, like if you want to keep things secret, that's, you know, every DM has its own style.
As a player, you never have the right to tell the dungeon master how they're supposed to run their monsters. If they've changed this troll is different than normal trolls, you know what? Anyway,
oh yeah, I'm 100% with you. That's
super
bad.
Infuriating. Right. Thank you, Farku, for bringing that up in the chat, because oh my god,
I'm with you 100%.
The thing about metagaming, right? Going back onto the topic, metagaming is only bad when it's making someone else's experience worse. If you're metagaming at the table and everyone else at the table is having a great time, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with what you're doing. If you're metagaming at the table and you're making someone else at your party and the table feel bad because you're metagaming, that's not cool. And sometimes that might be the dungeon master. Like Pete was just saying, he has no issue with you kind of looking up the monster stats and having that kind of whatever. He doesn't care. So that's not going to bother Pete, the dungeon master. Other DMs are really going to be disappointed. They're going to be like, oh, I had this really cool monster that's never used. I was super excited to use it, and you just looked it up. So I don't know. And that's when it's your responsibility as a player and the DM's responsibility as this observer to what's going on to realize when someone else at the table isn't having fun. It's everyone's responsibility to make sure that everyone has fun, but it's mostly the DM's responsibility.
It's extra. There's an extra burden placed upon the DM, but all players.
Creation. Oh yes, I'm sorry. I got super excited.
Someday we might just do whole streams for that. Like, I don't even think we need to talk about a bad example of metagaming. I think that sums it up perfectly without giving an even example. Just anything that you do that makes the game less fun for other people that is metagaming is bad metagaming.
Otherwise, it's good metagaming.
Yeah.
Pretty much. That's it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, we have some other, kind of general things. Make the game more fun for other people. Empathy, to quote Finn from Adventure Time. You can, if you need to know what empathy is, you can sing the empathy, put yourself in the place of me is the empathy song, which is a great way to remember how to do that. Not everyone has the same fun. Listen to people, communicate, be chill, show up on time. That's what I put that at the end because I figured we wouldn't have a lot. Just go to your games on time.
I'm interrupting.
Fucking call in. Call in if you're not going to be there.
Thank you, Farfel, for bringing this up. If you're a player and you invite a random person to the game without telling the dungeon master or any of the other players, you're a dick. That's all.
Yeah, don't do that thing. Tell people in advance if you're not going to be at a game.
Oh, yeah.
If you're new, learn what your characters do, players.
It's okay if it takes you 5 or 6 sessions to pick out, or if you get a new ability trying to figure that out.
It's okay if you make tons of mistakes. Just make an effort to know what your guy does.
When you're 40 sessions in, don't ask me how your sneak attack works, because especially with sneak attack when you're a rogue and you have 2 abilities.
Be nice to people. If someone does something sick, tell them that it was sick. Like if your DM runs a great session, you should be like, hey, that was a really good session. Tell them and they'll love you and be really happy about that. Say thank you to your DMs after you play because they probably work really hard to put together everything for the game.
Cycle back around, bring snacks, preferably cookies.
Bring the snacks.
Or if you're really cool, gluten-free cookies that still taste as good and don't poison me. I'll eat the regular gluten cookies anyway. It'll just suck later. But, cookies are great.
Yeah, that's I think all I got. I don't know if I had anything else big to go into.
Yeah, I really didn't either. Oh, and one last thing, and actually this is interesting. We got Plunder mentioning in chat, I fell asleep twice due to meds. I felt so bad. That's exactly the point. If you're going to call out, give your party plenty of time, but at the same time, don't make yourself do something if you're not up for it. If you feel like crap, if you've been working way too much and you haven't been sleeping or something difficult's going on in your life, there is nothing wrong with being like, hey guys, calling your friends up, letting them know it's not, you're not going to be able to do it in a week. And
your physical and mental well-being is always more important.
Absolutely, every time. And I've run into people and I've been that person who's played a game that they should not have played just because I felt like I had an obligation to do it. And it didn't make anything better.
Yeah, good comment from Xandril. Don't push yourself. We love you, player. Exactly. Yeah, we love you, random person on the internet who's listening.
No, just for those who, I don't want this to be too much of a mistake. Some of the things that we've talked about here are applicable to Pete and Jeremy's D&D time, but not all of them. If you got to call out an hour before D&D time, that's okay. We'd prefer if you gave us more notice, but it's cool. We're the kind of place where that's fine.
And a great comment from Infinite Tacos a while ago I wanted to cycle back to was, if it wasn't talked about here tonight, then it isn't a problem at the table. We've done everything, everyone.
Exactly.
So if you have any more problems, they're not actually problems.
And
that's not true.
Another one, we're just going to keep spitting them out here. Compromise is okay, guys. You don't have to win every battle. You don't have to threaten to leave the group every time. Obviously, I said
don't do that.
But you can compromise on things. It's cool. They don't want to go on the quest you want to go to. Oh, that's fine. We'll do my quest after. And everyone's like, all right, yeah, cool. You can make these. It's real easy. Just chat. Oh shit, they require 5-page paper. Oh yeah, exactly. You have to fill out the appropriate paperwork, Infinite Tacos, if you want to cancel on Pete and Jeremy's D&D time.
Infinite
5
Tacos,
pages
just imagine the paperwork.
You need to absolutely 100% need to get to a bank, get it notarized.
Get to your local Green Sun cult post office.
Precisely.
That's it. That's all I got.
Yeah, I think we're just kind of grasping at straws here.
Yeah, we're having fun. We're having fun.
We're actually at time.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out and listening. Again, I know this was, on the whole, a lot more serious episode than we usually do. And again, thanks for being respectful, everyone. And
yeah, you
also,
excellent.
You guys were awesome, for sure.
Everybody was great.
And for next week, we're going to be coming back at you with another class breakdown. What are we on? Fighter, I think, is what we're on. Fighter. Oh man, we love you too, Alex, and everyone. Fighter is a class design after my own heart. I'm so excited to talk.
Classes in 5e.
Oh man, I'm so excited to talk about a class that I have pretty much no issues with at all. It's a great design class.
Before we get too far, and actually we're already way too far, just wanted to give a shout out. Thank you very much, Infinite Tacos, for your Prime sub 2 months in a row. We really appreciate
thank you.
But before we end for the night, Pete, I think we have some things to announce.
Oh. Do you want to take it or you want me to?
Well, for those who've been thinking, you know what? I don't have enough D&D time in my life.
Me.
Well, yeah, Pete and Jeremy don't spend enough time doing. No, we're gonna be doing some more D&D time activities. Starting not this coming Saturday or Sunday, not this coming Sunday, but the Sunday after. We will be doing a stream. We are a little in flux about what it's going to be. We have, I think when we brainstormed yesterday, between our different options we've been shooting around, we had 8 different things.
8 or 9, yeah.
So we're going to be starting off, not this Sunday, but the Sunday after, with something we call DnDTime Delves. For those who played 4th edition and didn't hate it, me, one of the best things that came out in 4th edition, one of the best books, is the Dungeon Delve, which is a series of 30 random short encounters, or not encounters, short adventures, intended to each be played at a different character level. And I'm going to be going off and dusting off some of those old delves, leveling them up, swapping them out, manipulating and transforming them into
putting that 5e sheen on them.
And we're going to be playing some brutal one-shot 3 or 4 hour adventures.
High lethality. I will be a player in those. Jeremy will be DMing that, which means that you'll get to see me. For all of you who want vengeance, will get to see me get killed as a player on stream. For all of those who have shaken their fist in anger at my high kill count, the shoe shall be upon the other foot.
Exactly. We're not entirely sure how we're going to be rolling with this kind of stuff for now. I know for our first episode of DnDTime Delves, we're going to be playing with some people that we know, like on a personal level. But in the future, we may open that up to a few of our highest level D&D timers as a way of, saying thanks, guys, for being with us.
Yeah, if y'all are interested in that, which we'll talk about more as we go through.
Pete,
I'll have to be dead by then.
And 12 kobolds are going to surround you, and then you're going to.
I'll be long dead by then. Also, we're going to be adding in a couple of other potential things on Sundays. We kind of have vague plans for Sundays to be a little bit of a grab bag day as we move into the future. But we talked about this a long time ago. But one of the things that we are definitely locked into, that I'm extremely excited for is our homebrew stream, where we're going to be homebrewing subclasses for y'all to play on D&D time. There's going to be all sorts of goofy stuff. We're talking Green Sun Warlocks. We're talking Dreamwalker Monks. We're talking Candy Kingdom Knights. I don't know, anything.
Candy Knigget. I don't know. That was not as good as I thought.
Well,
oh well.
Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. If you're not familiar with our overall thing and you don't already know how to do this, you can learn all the information that you need to get involved with our stream underneath the screen here. Anything else?
Yeah, follow us on Twitter. That is twitter.com/DnD_time, where Jeremy tweets about all sorts of random things in the D&D Time banner. I'll be putting out more information about the delves there first. So if you want to know before anyone else, you better follow me on Twitter. Also, if you love D&D Time, tell your friends. It is the #1 way that we grow. It's the only really way that we grow. So besides random chance. So if you want more D&D
random
time,
chance.
Yeah, a random chance. So if you want more D&D time, spread the word. I think that's about it for me.
Oh, and low-key, 100%. Wait, well, one thing, Mr. Plunderloot, 100% Cloud and Conch clerics and paladins and whatnot. Oh yeah, that's high on the priority. Yes, nothing else. Jeremy, I'm Pete.
I am Jeremy.
And this is D&D Time Talks.
Bye!
Goodbye.
Whoa, we're back for like a second. Whoa.
We forgot to say something if you're still around, and that thing that we forgot